Imagine this. It's the dead of night in ancient Rome, the year 40 AD. The grand halls of the imperial palace on the Palatine Hill echo not with the dignified debates of senators or the soft whispers of courtiers, but with guttural moans, desperate cries, and the clink of chains. Shadows flicker from torchlight as bodies writhe in forced ecstasy, noble women, wives and daughters of Rome's elite, reduced to playthings in a den of depravity. At the center of it all, a young emperor with wild eyes and a godlike delusion laughs maniacally, his hands stained with the innocence he's shattered. This isn't fiction. This is the horrifying reality of Caligula, the man who turned the heart of an empire into a living nightmare. If stories like this grip you, hit that like button, subscribe for more dives into history's darkest corners, and drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Let me know if you're tuning in from Rome itself or somewhere far across the seas. Born Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus in 12 AD, Caligula entered a world already soaked in blood. His father, Germanicus, was a beloved general heir to the throne, whose mysterious death, poisoned, many whispered, left young Gaius vulnerable. His mother, Agrippina the Elder, and brothers were systematically eliminated by the paranoid Emperor Tiberius, who saw threats in every shadow. Gaius, just a boy, earned his nickname Caligula, meaning little boot, from the tiny soldier's sandals he wore while accompanying his father on campaigns. But beneath that cute moniker brewed a storm of trauma. By age 7 he'd witnessed his family's destruction. Brothers starved to death in prison, mother exiled and beaten until she took her own life. Survival meant silence, a mask of obedience in Tiberius's court. Tiberius, that aging tyrant, retreated to the island of Capri, a paradise twisted into a hell of pedophilic excesses and sadistic games. He adopted Caligula, bringing the teenager into his inner circle. What did young Gaius see there? Whispers of orgies with boys and girls, cliffs where victims were hurled to their deaths for amusement, and an emperor who reveled in power's corruption. Historians like Suetonius later claimed Caligula learned his lessons well, perhaps even participating to curry favor. Tiberius reportedly quipped, "I am nursing a viper in Rome's bosom." As Tiberius's health failed, Caligula waited, plotting or simply enduring, until the old man's smothered death in 37 AD thrust him onto the throne at age 24. Rome rejoiced, the nightmare of Tiberius was over. Or so they thought. The early months were golden. Caligula pardoned exiles, burned Tiberius's incriminating papers, and showered the people with games and coin. He was the people's emperor, handsome, charismatic, a breath of fresh air. But beneath the surface, the seeds of madness, sown by loss, abuse and unchecked power, were germinating. Whispers of headaches, insomnia, and a growing megalomania hinted at what was coming. Then, in October 37 AD, disaster struck. A severe illness, perhaps encephalitis or epilepsy, left him comatose for weeks. Rome prayed for his recovery. When he awoke, the man who emerged was no longer Gaius. He was a monster, convinced of his divinity, ready to unleash hell on earth. The descent had begun. As Caligula's eyes fluttered open after that fateful illness, the world around him seemed sharper, more vivid, and infinitely more malleable to his whims. Doctors had bled him, prayed over him, but whatever afflicted his body had ravaged his mind. He spoke of visions, gods whispering in his ear, Jupiter himself declaring him equal among immortals. Rome, still celebrating his survival, had no idea the emperor they'd saved was now a ticking bomb of insanity. He began small, demanding temples in his honor, but soon the demands escalated. "I am a god," he declared to stunned senators, forcing them to worship statues of himself gilded in gold. One such statue, life-sized and dressed in his daily attire, was paraded through the streets like a living deity. The palace, once a symbol of Roman grandeur, started its transformation. Caligula expanded it lavishly, connecting it to the temple of Castor and Pollux, declaring it an extension of the god's realm, his realm. But divinity came with earthly appetites. His relationships with his sisters deepened into something unholy. Drusilla, his favorite, became more than kin. Ancient sources claim he treated her as a wife, sharing her bed openly. When she died in 38 AD, possibly from a plague or his own excesses, Caligula's grief was apocalyptic. He deified her, the first Roman woman so honored, forbade laughter or bathing during her mourning period, and wandered the countryside in despair, hair unkempt, raving to the winds. Her death cracked him further. The other sisters, Julia Livilla and Agrippina the Younger, faced his oscillating affections. Love one moment, exile the next on charges of conspiracy. Power unchecked bred cruelty. Caligula began executing rivals on whims, often during dinners where guests watched in terror as heads rolled. One senator, invited to a feast, was suddenly accused of treason. Caligula had him tortured on the spot, forcing the man to return bandaged and bloody to continue the meal as if nothing happened. "Let them hate me so long as they fear me," he famously said. The Praetorian Guard, his protectors, became tools of terror, hauling away anyone who displeased him. Financially, his extravagance drained the treasury. Lavish games where he fought as a gladiator, always winning of course, bridges of boats across the Bay of Baiae for pointless parades, and golden barges for nocturnal revels. To fund this madness he turned to extortion. Inheritance taxes skyrocketed. He auctioned off gladiators and even imperial furniture. But the darkest innovation was yet to come, the palace itself as a revenue source. Whispers spread of nights where the halls filled with the unwilling, where dignity was bartered for survival. Caligula's gaze fell on the wives of the elite, seeing not people but opportunities for humiliation and profit. The orgies began subtly, masked as imperial invitations no one could refuse. Senators arrived with their families, only to watch in horror as Caligula claimed what he desired. One account tells of him interrupting a wedding, dragging the bride away mid-ceremony, marrying her briefly, then discarding her with crude commentary on her performance. Rome's nobility, once proud, now trembled at every summons. The palace, that gleaming marble fortress, was morphing into a labyrinth of lust and fear, where the emperor's laughter echoed like thunder before a storm. The transformation accelerated as Caligula's delusions intertwined with his desires. He began hosting banquets that devolved into spectacles of debauchery, where wine flowed like blood and boundaries dissolved under his command. Guests were compelled to participate, their refusals met with threats of ruin or death. Ancient historians like Cassius Dio paint vivid pictures. Caligula, adorned in silks and jewels, reclining on couches as he orchestrated the chaos, his eyes gleaming with sadistic joy. He boasted of his conquests, detailing intimacies with sisters and strangers alike, forcing listeners to applaud or face accusations of disloyalty. Incest was just the beginning. Caligula's marriage to Milonia Caesonia, a woman of notorious promiscuity, was a match made in hell. She bore him a daughter, Julia Drusilla, whom he paraded as proof of his virility, even joking about smashing her head against walls in fits of rage, echoing Hercules's myths, which he emulated. Caesonia encouraged his excesses, perhaps out of fear or shared madness, joining in the revels that turned the palace into a nightly inferno. Rumors swirled of her poisoning rivals or procuring victims for his bed. Financial desperation pushed him further. Having squandered 2.7 billion sesterces in under a year, equivalent to centuries of tax revenue, Caligula innovated grotesquely. He established a brothel within the palace walls, partitioning rooms with curtains and filling them with the wives and daughters of senators. These women, from Rome's most ancient families, were forced into prostitution, their services auctioned to the highest bidders. Caligula himself set the prices, collecting fees like a common pimp, all under the guise of imperial fundraising. One noblewoman, dragged from her home, reportedly endured the humiliation only to return to a husband commanded to praise her service to the empire. The emperor wandered the halls inspecting his merchandise, sampling as he pleased. This wasn't mere lust, it was domination. By degrading the elite, Caligula eroded the foundations of Roman society. Senators, once rulers in their own right, now pimped their kin to survive. One, Proculus, had his wife taken mid-dinner. Caligula later critiqued her coldly, sealing the family's fate. The palace brothel became a symbol of his reign, opulent yet obscene, where marble floors slick with sweat bore witness to shattered lives. Nights blurred into days of excess, with Caligula insisting on performances that mocked the gods, himself as Venus in drag or Apollo with a lyre, demanding worship amid the moans. Rome whispered in terror. The streets, once alive with cheers for little boots, now fell silent at his approach. His horse, Incitatus, fared better, housed in ivory stables, fed from golden mangers, even nominated for consul as a joke on the Senate. But the laughter was hollow, beneath it lurked a growing dread. Conspiracies brewed in shadowed corners as the emperor's madness spiraled, pulling the empire into its vortex. The orgy of power was consuming everything, and the end, though distant, loomed like a gathering storm. As the palace brothel flourished, Caligula's cruelties extended beyond its walls, infusing every aspect of Roman life with horror. He reveled in public spectacles, transforming the Circus Maximus and amphitheaters into arenas of arbitrary death. Gladiatorial games became personal vendettas. If crowds displeased him, he'd order sections slaughtered. One infamous day, lacking criminals for the beasts, he had spectators thrown to lions instead. "They deserve it for boring me," he quipped. Victims were mutilated creatively, sawn in half, dressed as mythical figures for themed executions, while Caligula dined on exotic fruits, critiquing the screams like a theater critic. His god complex peaked with bizarre edicts. He built a bridge of ships across the Bay of Baiae, riding across it in golden armor, claiming victory over Neptune. The cost? Lives lost in construction, fortunes wasted. Back in Rome, he conversed with the moon, challenging the goddess to come to his bed, and ordered statues of gods beheaded, replaced with his own likeness. Temples became extensions of his ego. Priests sacrificed hecatombs of animals daily in his name, their blood-staining altars meant for Jupiter. Domestically, terror reigned. Caligula adopted his nephew Gemellus only to execute him months later, forcing the boy to commit suicide after a coughing fit, interpreted as mockery. His sisters, once lovers, faced exile. Julia Livilla and Agrippina accused of adultery with his brother-in-law Lepidus, who was beheaded. Their banishment to barren islands involved sewn into sacks with snakes, a nod to ancient punishments. Even Caesonia wasn't safe. Rumors suggested he toyed with killing her and their daughter for sport. The brothel's profits couldn't sustain his madness. He imposed absurd taxes on food, lawsuits, even porters' wages. Inheritance laws twisted so he claimed estates of the living, declaring them dead if they mentioned wills. One man, rumored rich, was forced to name Caligula heir then poisoned. The elite lived in paranoia, attending endless banquets where toasts hid poison and laughter masked fear. Caligula's jokes were deadly, inviting a senator to discuss his neck, then having him strangled. Yet glimmers of the old Gaius surfaced, moments of generosity like freeing slaves or funding public works, but they were eclipsed by the darkness. His health deteriorated. Epileptic fits, perhaps, fueled rages where he'd bite attendants or roll on floors foaming. The palace, now a gilded prison, trapped all in its web. Guards patrolled, spies listened, and the orgies continued, a ceaseless cycle of degradation. Rome, the eternal city, teetered under one man's fractured mind, as whispers of rebellion grew louder in the night. The whispers coalesced into shadows of conspiracy as Caligula's reign dragged into its third year. The Senate, humiliated beyond endurance, seethed with resentment. Senators who'd watched their wives prostituted, their fortunes seized, now plotted in hushed tones. Caligula sensed it, paranoia amplifying his terrors. He doubled the Praetorian Guard, but even they chafed under his whims, forced to hail his horse as colleague, or endure midnight summons for trivialities. Extravagance reached absurd heights. Caligula commissioned 2 massive pleasure barges on Lake Nemi, floating palaces with marble floors, plumbing, and gardens. One served as a temple to Diana, the other, a venue for orgies where guests sailed into debauchery under starlit skies. Excavated centuries later, these ships revealed mosaics and bronzes, testaments to wasted opulence amid Rome's suffering. On land, he planned a canal through the Isthmus of Corinth, a feat abandoned after his death, and dreamed of moving the capital to Alexandria, emulating Alexander the Great. Military follies added to the chaos. In 39 AD he marched north to conquer Germania and Britain, but the campaigns were farces. At the Rhine, he had soldiers collect seashells as spoils from the ocean, parading them in triumph back to Rome. The invasion of Britain involved shouting at waves, declaring war on Neptune. Troops, bewildered, obeyed out of fear. Returning, he demanded a triumph, forcing citizens to acclaim his victories, while the treasury bled dry. Personal horrors intensified. Caligula's daughter, little Drusilla, was proclaimed a mini-goddess, but he joked of her ferocity, claiming she'd scratch eyes like him. Caesonia, ever loyal, bore his rages, perhaps poisoning threats herself. The brothel evolved. Now youths of both sexes were trafficked, dressed as gods for themed nights where Caligula played director and participant. One victim, a beautiful boy named Sporus. Wait, that was Nero? For Caligula, it was countless unnamed, their stories lost to time. Society fractured. Jews in Alexandria faced pogroms after refusing to worship him. Embassies begged for mercy, but he planned a colossal statue of himself in Jerusalem's temple, averted only by delay. In Rome, famine loomed as grain ships were repurposed for his bridges. The people, once adoring, now starved while he feasted on peacock brains and flamingo tongues. The palace, that epicenter of madness, pulsed with impending doom. Caligula's sleep grew fitful, haunted by dreams of assassination. He built secret passages, slept with daggers, but trust evaporated. Friends became suspects. One dinner, he laughed hysterically, explaining, "I just realized I could have all your throats cut right now." The laughter died. The descent steepened, hurtling toward an inevitable bloody end. As 40 AD dawned, Caligula's godhood demands escalated to blasphemy. He conversed with Jupiter's statue in the Capitoline temple, whispering secrets and arguing audibly, once threatening to smash it if disobeyed. Priests trembled as he insisted on human sacrifices, rare in Rome, claiming his divine hunger. One volunteer, dressed as a victim, was truly slaughtered when Caligula changed his mind. The city reeked of fear and incense, altars smoking endlessly in his name. The brothel's depravity deepened, incorporating exotic elements. Slaves from conquered lands trained in foreign arts, forced into performances that blended cultures in grotesque fusion. Caligula, ever the innovator, introduced lotteries where winners gained entry, turning humiliation into a public game. Senators bid on their own relatives to save them, only to lose everything. One account from Philo describes a father paying ransom for his daughter, only for Caligula to mock, "Why buy what I can take for free?" Familial bonds shattered further. His uncle Claudius, the stammering scholar, survived by playing the fool, dodging suspicion. Sisters in exile wrote pleading letters, but Caligula responded with venom, accusing them of plots with lovers. Agrippina would later rise as mother to Nero, her own monster, but for now she endured starvation on her island prison. Public life became theater of the absurd. Caligula appeared in the Senate dressed as Hercules, lion skin and club, demanding votes on whims. His horse Incitatus attended meetings, with senators debating its opinions. Laughter was mandatory, frowns meant death. One session he proposed marrying the moon, debating lunar dowries seriously. Economic terror peaked. He revived treason trials, maestas, where mere thoughts condemned. Accusers were rewarded with portions of estates. False testimonies flourished. One man killed himself before trial. Caligula sued his corpse for lost entertainment. Taxes on prostitutes, ironic given his brothel, funded more excesses. Health rumors swirled. Lead poisoning from sweetened wines exacerbating madness, or congenital syphilis from Tiberius's court. Fits left him convulsing, foaming, emerging with wilder ideas. The palace staff lived in dread, attendants executed for looking suspicious. Conspiracies multiplied. The Praetorian prefect Cassius Chaerea, mocked for his high voice, Caligula called him girly, nursed grudges. Senators like Valerius Asiaticus joined, plotting in whispers. Caligula, sensing doom, increased bodyguards but alienated them with insults. The orgies grew frantic as if he raced against time. Nights of endless revelry, bodies piling in exhaustion, while he proclaimed, "I live as if each day is my last, and yours." Rome held its breath, the empire's heart pounding in terror, awaiting the blade that would end the nightmare. The blade's shadow lengthened as Caligula's antics turned increasingly erratic. In early 41 AD he planned a trip to Egypt, dreaming of pharaonic worship, but omens plagued him. Blood raining from skies during games, statues weeping. He dismissed them with bravado, sacrificing to himself for protection. The palace brothel, now infamous, operated like a business. Ledgers tracking earnings, clients from merchants to foreigners. Caligula bragged of its success, claiming it restored the treasury while breaking spirits. Women emerged scarred, some suiciding in shame. Husbands divorced them under pressure, families ruined. One noble, Livia Orestilla, was married to him briefly. He divorced her saying, "She's as cold as my uncle Claudius." Cruelty extended to animals. He fed criminals to beasts but, short on meat, had them eat each other. His favorite lion dined on human flesh beside him at table. Incitatus enjoyed banquets with senators, oats mixed with gold flakes. Social engineering twisted further. He forced intermarriages between classes, mocking patrician purity. At one wedding he claimed ius primi noctis, rite of first night, a fabricated tradition violating the bride publicly. International relations suffered. Embassies from client kings waited months, humiliated. Ptolemy of Mauritania was executed for wearing a finer purple robe. His kingdom annexed. Jews sent Philo to plead against the Jerusalem statue. Caligula received them in drag, dancing mockingly. Domestically, famine struck. Grain shortages led to riots, quelled brutally. Caligula blamed bakers, executing them en masse. His response? More games distracting with blood. Paranoia peaked. He slept little, wandering palace halls at night, conversing with ghosts of his family. Dreams of a sea monster foretold assassination. He had interpreters killed for bad news. The Praetorians, sworn protectors, turned plotters. Chaerea recruited tribunes Cornelius Sabinus and others, senators like Annius Vinicius joining. They met secretly, vowing to end the tyranny. Caligula, oblivious, planned the Palatine Games, a festival of theater and excess. On January 24, 41 AD, the stage was set. Caligula attended the games, sacrificing a flamingo whose blood splattered him, an ill omen ignored. He lingered in a cryptoporticus, an underground passage connecting palace to theater, discussing actors with friends. The orgy of his reign neared its climax. As he turned to leave, Chaerea struck the first blow, stabbing his neck with the cry, "Take this." Others joined, blades flashing in frenzy. Caligula staggered, screaming, "I still live." But 30 wounds felled him, stabbed in genitals, a symbolic retribution for his violations. His body, mangled, lay in pooling blood, the emperor god reduced to meat. Guards loyal to Caligula rushed in, slaying some conspirators, but the deed was done. His German bodyguards rampaged, killing innocents in revenge, but the Senate convened hastily, debating a republic's restoration. Chaos reigned. Praetorians, seeking a puppet, found Claudius hiding behind a curtain, proclaiming him emperor to secure their pay. Caligula's body was partially cremated in the Lamian gardens, buried secretly. Sisters later exhumed and properly interred him. Caesonia and daughter met grim ends. A centurion stabbed Caesonia as she offered her neck, saying, "Strike here." The infant was dashed against a wall, her tiny skull crushed, a horrific echo of Caligula's jokes. The palace, stained with blood and sin, was purged. Brothel partitions torn down, statues toppled, name erased from monuments and damnatio memoriae. Yet his legacy lingered, a cautionary scar on Rome's soul. Historians debated his madness. Suetonius and Dio sensationalized, perhaps exaggerating under later emperors' biases. Modern scholars suggest epilepsy, hyperthyroidism, or psychological trauma from childhood losses. Lead poisoning from pipes and wines could explain delusions. But the core horrors, executions, brothel excesses, stand corroborated. Rome sighed in relief, but the damage endured. Treasury empty, nobility decimated, trust shattered. Claudius, underestimated, proved capable, but the Julio-Claudian line careened toward Nero's own fires. Caligula's reign, just 4 years, felt eternal in its terror. From beloved prince to divine monster, his descent mirrored humanity's darkest potentials. Power corrupting absolutely, trauma birthing tyrants. The palace, once a brothel of horrors, stood silent, but echoes of moans and screams haunted its halls. In retrospect, his life was a tragedy scripted by fate. Orphaned, abused, elevated too young, he became the viper Tiberius predicted. Yet pity mixes with revulsion. Was he victim or villain? Both, perhaps, in history's gray shades. The empire recovered, but scars remained. Future emperors eyed the throne warily, knowing one man's madness could unravel all. Caligula's story warns, beneath civilization's veneer lurks chaos, ready to erupt. As we reflect, remember those nameless victims. Women degraded, families broken, lives extinguished. Their suffering, not his antics, defines the horror. Rome endured, but at what cost? The emperor who turned his palace into an orgy left a legacy of blood, a dark chapter in humanity's endless descent. But wait, the descent doesn't end with death. Caligula's ghost haunted Rome long after. Temples dedicated to him were rededicated, but superstitions persisted. Sightings of his specter wandering the Palatine, wailing in eternal torment. Claudius, his uncle, navigated carefully, pardoning exiles but executing Chaerea to appease loyalists. Yet whispers of Caligula's divine survival fueled cults in provinces, where some mourned him as a misunderstood god. Economically, recovery was arduous. Claudius audited accounts, discovering embezzlements and wastes, like the Nemi ships, sunk deliberately post-assassination to erase shame. Taxes eased, games moderated, but the brothel's stigma clung to noble families. Women who'd endured it faced social ostracism. Some remarried quietly, others retreated to convents or suicide. Culturally, Caligula's excesses inspired art and caution. Poets like Seneca, who survived his wrath, penned tragedies echoing the tyranny. Later, under Nero, Agrippina's son, the cycle repeated. Fires, murders, orgies anew. Was it bloodline curse or power's poison? Modern lenses dissect him further. Psychologists diagnose narcissism, sadism, borderline personality from traumas. Historians debate sources. Suetonius wrote decades later, possibly sensationalizing for Domitian's court. Archaeological finds, like Palatine ruins, confirm expansions but not depravities. Yet coins bearing his image, serene and youthful, contrast the monster described. His influence rippled through time. Renaissance artists depicted him in lurid paintings. Films like the 1979 Caligula amplified myths with explicit excess. Today his name synonyms tyranny, a byword for madness. But peel deeper. Caligula's reign exposed Rome's flaws, senatorial weakness, military sway, imperial cult's dangers. It spurred reforms. Later emperors like Trajan balanced power better. Yet the human cost remains. Imagine the palace nights. Torchlight flickering on tear-streaked faces, laughter masking sobs, an emperor's touch like fire. Those stories, lost to time, scream from history's margins. As we ascend from this abyss, consider, history isn't just dates and deeds but emotions etched in souls. Caligula's descent pulls us into empathy for the fallen, vigilance against tyrants rising. The orgy ended, but its lessons endure, a chilling reminder that empires like men can crumble from within. Emerging from the depths, we see how Caligula's shadow stretched beyond Rome. In provinces, governors trembled at erratic orders, build statues overnight or face recall. One in Syria delayed the Jerusalem Colossus, saving a revolt, divine intervention, perhaps as Caligula died before enforcing it. Back home, the Senate's relief was short-lived. Claudius's rule brought stability, but memories festered. Families petitioned for restitution from seized estates. Some succeeded, others not. The brothel's clients faced blackmail or shame, societal wounds slow to heal. Literary echoes persisted. Tacitus, though sparse on Caligula, highlighted systemic corruption. Josephus detailed Jewish perils, Philo's embassy a testament to diplomatic terror. Archaeology unveils layers. Palatine excavations reveal grand halls where orgies unfolded, mosaics trodden by unwilling feet. Lake Nemi shipwrecks recovered by Mussolini showcased engineering amid madness, baths heating, artistry wasted on whims. Psychohistory probes, childhood PTSD from family murders, Tiberius's abuses shaping a sociopath. Genetics? Julio Claudian's plagued by ailments, Augustus's frailty, Tiberius's ulcers, hinting hereditary woes. Cultural impact evolved. Medieval chroniclers demonized him further. Renaissance humanists used him to critique monarchy. Enlightenment thinkers cited him against absolutism. Today, pop culture caricatures. Comics, games, memes reducing horror to punchlines. But reclaim the gravity. Each execution was a life snuffed, each violation a soul scarred. Women of the brothel, names like Lalia Paulina who he briefly married, endured, their resilience unspoken heroism. Senators' suicides, forced to praise their tormentor, highlight dignity's fragility. Even Incitatus's tale, absurd, underscores mockery of institutions. Caligula's descent mirrors broader human falls. From promise to perdition, trauma begetting trauma. In our age of leaders unchecked, his story cautions. Power without accountability breeds monsters. As the narrative unwinds, feel the weight. History's not distant but a mirror to our potential darkness. The palace orgy, symbol of excess, warns against letting madness reign. Yet even in warning, fascination lingers. Why do we devour tales of tyrants? Perhaps to confront our shadows, understanding evil prevents it. Caligula's arc, from orphan boy to divine despot, humanizes without excusing. Post-mortem, his sisters returned. Agrippina schemed, birthing Nero whose fires and fiddling echoed uncle's madness. Julia Livilla, briefly restored, faced exile again under Claudius. Cycles of vengeance perpetuated. Imperial cult evolved, deification became standard, but Caligula's excess made it cautious. Vespasian later joked on deathbed, "I think I'm becoming a god," mocking the practice. Artifacts survive, coins with his sisters promoting dynasty, statues recarved for successors. The Gemonian stairs where bodies were hurled, still evoke his terrors. Modern analogies abound. Dictators mirroring his whims, extravagant palaces amid poverty, cults of personality. Psychology terms Caligula syndrome for delusional power. But focus on victims. Noblemen's diaries, if existed, would recount nights of dread, waiting for summons. Children's lives upended like young Nero witnessing echoes. The brothel, core horror, exemplifies gendered power abuse, women as commodities, a thread through history. In Descent's aftermath, Rome rebuilt. Aqueducts, roads under Claudius healed scars. But psychic wounds? Generations carried paranoia. Caligula's story, gripping in grit, reminds, history's descent is collective, rising requires vigilance. The emperor's orgy ended, but its chill lingers, a viral echo through time. As echoes fade, consider legacy's layers. Caligula's brevity amplified impact, 4 years scorching eternity. Historians' biases color him. Senatorial authors like Suetonius resenting emperors amplified scandals. Perhaps some orgies were exaggerated, brothel a metaphor for corruption. But kernels of truth persist. Financial records show extortions, executions documented. Cultural revivals. 19th century plays romanticized his madness. 20th century films sensationalized. Bob Guccioni's Caligula blended history with porn, mirroring the brothel's blur. Psychoanalytic views. Freudians see Oedipal rage from father's loss, mother's fate. Jungians, archetypal tyrant. Global parallels. Mad kings like Ivan the Terrible, whose oprichnina terror echoed Praetorian purges. Victim-centered retellings emerge, amplifying silenced voices. Imagine a wife's diary, terror of palace nights, resilience in survival. Rome's resilience shines. From ashes of tyranny, empires endure. But at cost, liberties curtailed, militarism risen. In our era, with viral histories, Caligula trends, YouTube docs dissecting delusions, TikToks memeing incitatus. Yet emotional grip remains. Descent into darkness mirrors personal struggles. Trauma's toll, power's corruption. The palace, rebuilt, stands today in ruins, tourists unaware of ghosts. But we know, feeling the heavy immersion. Finally, ascent from abyss. Caligula's tale, horrific yet human, teaches empathy for broken, wariness of breakers. The emperor who turned his palace into an orgy embodies excess's end, assassination's blade. Legacy, cautionary icon, viral in villainy. Rome rose, but scars remind. History's descents are warnings, not inevitabilities. If this gripped you, remember the hook's shock, real raw. History lives, disturbingly alive.